Hey, everybody, and welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today, and, well, it's something we all struggle with, that feeling of not being good enough,
Sure.
We're going to break down this Tony Robbins video I saw. He's working with this woman, Debbie,
Oh, yeah.
and her story is just so real, and it's amazing to see how she figures out, like, where this fear comes from.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. Like everybody at some point has probably felt that feeling of not being enough.
Totally.
And figuring out where it comes from is pretty crucial to being able to overcome it, right?
Totally. And it's interesting because Tony starts off by saying that, the number one fear that people have is not feeling enough.
Right. Like it's the root of so many other fears and insecurities.
Like, just think about that for a minute. Like, have you ever felt that way? Like,
Yeah.
you're not smart enough or successful enough or just not enough, period.
Yeah. And it's so scary because we're afraid that if we're not enough, then people don't love us.
Right. It's like this
Sure.
deep-seated fear of rejection.
Yeah. And that can really hold us back in life.
Right.
Hmm.
So let's meet Debbie.
Okay.
She seems like a really strong person. But right away, she's talking about how she struggles with guilt and anxiety.
Interesting.
And she has this interesting way of describing how she handles those feelings. She calls it her crazy eight.
Her crazy eight.
Yeah. Basically, she goes around and around through all these bad feelings, like sadness and loneliness,
Oh, wow.
then anger and frustration. Like, she's tough, so she always finds a way to get out of it, but it must be exhausting,
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because Tony actually describes it as her using it to punish herself.
Really.
Yeah, like it's a cycle of self-sabotage.
What?
So she starts with the guilt, right? Thinking she should have done something differently.
Right.
Then comes sadness because she feels alone.
Oh, like nobody understands.
Exactly. And then because she's strong, she gets mad at herself for being stuck.
Right.
Then the frustration kicks in because she can't fix it.
Wow. The cycle just continues.
And then the whole thing just starts over again.
Never-ending loop.
Yeah, it's like being on a roller coaster that you just can't get off of.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So Tony talks about how her identity is like a thermostat. It's always set to a certain temperature, like 72 degrees. Even when she tries to change, she gets pulled back to those old feelings.
Right. It's like her default setting.
Right.
And Tony says that's because she has this deep-seated belief that she always has to be strong and giving and taking care of everything.
It's like that's her comfort zone.
Exactly.
So how does she get unstuck?
Well, how do you think she gets unstuck? Think about it for a second. What do you think?
Well, she talks about using exercise, like running or walking, to feel better.
Right. Like she's trying to change her state by changing her physiology.
Yeah. But Tony says it doesn't usually last.
Yeah. It's like taking a pill for pain. It might help for a little while, but it doesn't fix the problem.
It's a temporary solution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're not really addressing the root cause.
Right. So then we see this change in Debbie when she starts to feel truly thankful. Like you can just see her relax.
It's like a weight has been lifted off of her shoulders.
Yeah.
And Tony points out that it's not enough to just say you're thankful. You have to really feel it, like in your heart.
It's about embodying that feeling of gratitude.
Exactly. Like, what's that like for you? Where do you feel it in your body? What changes when you're genuinely grateful?
That's a great question for our listeners to ponder.
Yeah, take a minute and think about it.
And then Tony, he helps Debbie go deeper.
Uh-huh.
He helps her figure out, like, where this fear is coming from.
And where is it coming from?
It goes back to her dad.
Her dad. Makes sense.
Yeah, her dad.
A lot of our, I guess you could say baggage comes from our childhood, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it would make sense if her relationship with her dad is playing a role in this.
Exactly.
Right.
And he asks her this really powerful question. Who did you have to be to get your father's love and respect? And her answers tell us a lot. Strong, tough, no complaining.
So she always felt like she had to be perfect.
Right. Like she had to earn his love.
And that probably created a lot of pressure for her.
Yeah. And you can see how these qualities, while they're good things, they might hold her back from being her true self.
Right. It's like she built her whole identity around those qualities, even though they might not have been authentic to who she really is.
And that's when Tony talks about masculine and feminine energy.
Oh, interesting.
He says we all have both, no matter if we're a man or a woman.
Right. It's about balance.
Right. And for Debbie, it seems like she's really focused on her masculine side.
So she's been suppressing her feminine energy.
Exactly. And
Okay.
I think you can sense that she wants to show that feminine side, but she's scared it will make people not love her.
Yeah. It's like she's afraid to be vulnerable.
Right. It's kind of sad.
It is. Like she's denying a part of herself.
And this is where Sage Robbins, Tony's wife, comes in and she says something so important.
Oh, yeah. What does she say?
She says that society doesn't value feminine energy enough, even women themselves.
It's true.
Yeah.
We're often taught to be tough and hide our emotions.
And how many times have you felt like you had to, be tough and hide your feelings and just keep going?
More times than I can count.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It's like we're conditioned to believe that vulnerability is a weakness.
But it's actually a strength. It
Right.
takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable.
So then there's this really powerful moment when Debbie imagines talking to her dad.
Oh, okay.
And he gives her this new message. It's okay to be herself with both her masculine and feminine sides.
Wow, that's beautiful.
It's like she finally gets permission to let go of that old way of thinking.
And to embrace her true self.
Exactly. And it's amazing how just that one shift in perspective can have such a profound impact.
It's like a whole new world opens up for her.
And that brings us to love strategies. Tony says we all show love in different ways. And sometimes those differences can cause problems in relationships.
That's so true. Like some people show love through words of affirmation while others show it through acts of service.
Exactly. And if we don't understand those differences, it can lead to a lot of misunderstandings.
Yeah. It's like we're speaking different languages.
So what about you? How do you show love?
That's a good question. I think I tend to show love through acts of service.
Really?
Yeah. Like I like to do things for the people I care about.
That's interesting. How about you?
What about you? How do you show love?
I think I'm more of a words of affirmation person.
Oh, so you like to hear those sweet nothings.
Yeah, exactly. Like I need to hear those words of encouragement and appreciation.
That makes sense.
And sometimes it can be frustrating when people don't show love in the way that you need it.
Yeah. Like if you're a words of affirmation person and your partner is an acts of service person, you might feel unloved even though they're doing things for you all the time.
Right. It's like they're speaking different love languages.
Exactly.
But once you understand those differences, it can make a huge difference in your relationship.
Absolutely. It's like you finally have the key to understanding each other.
So this has been a really insightful deep dive so far.
It really has.
We've learned so much about the fear of not being enough and how it can manifest in our lives.
And we've seen how Debbie was able to overcome this fear by understanding its root and embracing her true self.
It's a powerful reminder that we all have the potential for transformation.
And that we're not alone in this journey.
So let's continue this deep dive in our next episode.
It's good.
And see what other insights we can uncover.
I'm looking forward to it.
It makes me think about how sometimes we feel like we're not enough when we don't get how other people show love.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It goes back to that fear of not being enough.
Yeah.
And when we don't have those close connections, it's easy to feel kind of lost and alone, like we don't belong.
Yeah. Yeah. And you start thinking am I not good enough, or am I not doing things right?
Exactly. We start to question ourselves and our value, even our right to be here. It's like our whole sense of self gets all shaky.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So this is where understanding those different love strategies becomes really important. We need to remember that people show love in different ways, and it doesn't mean they don't care if they don't, do it exactly the way we expect.
Yeah, it's like speaking different languages,
Right.
If you're speaking Spanish and someone else is speaking French, you're not going to understand each other, even if you're both trying to say, I love you.
I love that analogy. That's so true. So how can we start to learn each other's love languages?
Well, the first step is to just be aware of our own love strategy. How do we show love to others?
Yeah.
And what makes us feel loved in return? Once we understand our own needs, then we can start to pay attention to how the people in our lives express love.
Right. So for someone like Debbie, who, maybe she craves words of affirmation, she needs to communicate that to her partner or her friends, let them know that hearing those words is really important to her.
Exactly. And on the flip side, if you're someone who shows love through acts of service, you need to make sure that your loved ones understand that, those actions are your way of saying, I care about you.
Right. I think this is where a lot of couples get stuck.
Oh, for sure.
They're both showing love, but they're just not speaking the same language. So it's like their message is getting lost in translation.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
And it can lead to so much frustration and hurt feelings. But the good news is that once we start to understand these differences, we can learn to speak each other's love languages and build stronger and more fulfilling relationships.
Right. Right. So maybe instead of getting upset when, your partner doesn't bring you flowers, you realize that, like, he's been working extra hours to provide for you.
Yeah.
And that's his way of showing love.
Right. Or maybe instead of expecting your girlfriend to read your mind, you tell her specifically what you need to feel loved and appreciated.
It all comes back to communication.
Yeah, communication is key.
This makes me think about how Tony talked about the differences in how, like, men and women tend to respond to problems.
Oh, yeah, like he said that men often want to fix things while women just want to talk about them, right?
Yeah. It's so true. Like, I've definitely seen that in my own relationships. Like, when I'm upset, I just want to vent. And my husband, like, immediately wants to offer solutions.
It's that, classic Mars-Venus difference.
Right.
Men are from Mars, where they're, like, taught to be problem solvers. Women are from Venus, where they're encouraged to, connect and share their feelings.
But it doesn't mean that one way is better than the other.
Right. They're just different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's important to, like, respect those differences.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
if a man is trying to fix your problems, it's not because he doesn't care.
Right.
It's because, like, that's how he shows love and support.
Right. And if a woman wants to talk about her feelings, it's not because she's being dramatic.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's because she needs to, process her emotions and feel heard.
She wants to feel understood.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, the next time you find yourself in one of these situations, like, try to see it from the other person's perspective.
Put yourself in their shoes.
Exactly. Instead of getting frustrated, try to, like, understand where they're coming from.
And have some empathy.
Right. Maybe you can say something like, hey, I appreciate you wanting to fix this, but right now I just need to talk.
Or, I know you need to process this, so I'm here to listen without judgment.
It's about creating, like, a safe space where both people feel heard and respected.
Exactly. That's what real intimacy is all about.
This reminds me of something else that Tony said about how men often feel fulfilled when they're challenged, while women feel fulfilled when they're appreciated.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. It goes back to those core, masculine and feminine energies. Men thrive on, like, competition and achievement, while women thrive on connection and nurturing.
So if you're a woman who's always trying to fix your man or tell him what to do, you're actually undermining his sense of masculinity and his ability to, like, feel fulfilled.
And if you're a man who's, like, not taking the time to appreciate and acknowledge your woman, you're neglecting her need for connection and nurturing.
Right. It's about finding that balance.
Yeah, finding that sweet spot where both partners feel supported and empowered.
Exactly. And this brings us back to Debbie. She's realizing that this need to be strong, to fix everything, is part of why she struggles to, like, let go and embrace her feminine side.
Right. She's always on, always in that masculine energy of doing and achieving.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where the fear comes in. Like, if she lets go of that role, if she allows herself to be vulnerable, she's worried that she'll lose the love and respect she's worked so hard to earn.
It's like she's afraid to let her guard down and show her true self.
Right. Right. But here's the beautiful thing. Through this process, through connecting with her father's love and Sage's wisdom, she starts to see that her feminine qualities are just as valuable, just as worthy of love.
It's like she's finally giving herself permission to be her whole self, to embrace all the beautiful qualities that make her unique.
And that's a message we all need to hear. Whether you're a man or a woman, embracing your full self, both masculine and feminine, is essential for true happiness and fulfillment. It makes me think about how Debbie talked about using exercise to, like, shift her state. It's like changing your body can change your mind.
Oh, absolutely. It's a powerful tool that we can all use. Tony calls it changing your physiology.
Right. So what are some other ways we can, like, do that?
Well, there's the, obvious things like exercise and getting enough sleep.
Right.
But we can also change our physiology through our posture, our breathing, and even our facial expressions.
So if you're feeling down, like, try standing up straight, taking a few deep breaths, and smiling.
Fake it till you make it.
It might sound silly, but it can actually make a difference.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's about sending signals to your brain that, like, you're in control and you're ready to feel good.
And it's something we can do anytime, anywhere.
It's like having a secret weapon in our back pocket.
I love that. Another thing that really resonated with me was when Tony talked about how everyone has a different love strategy.
Yeah. It's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking that, everyone expresses and experiences love the same way we do.
But that's just not true.
Oh, not at all.
Like, some people are huggers and kissers,
right,
while others show love through acts of service or words of affirmation.
Exactly.
And if we don't understand those differences, it can lead to, like, a lot of hurt feelings and misunderstandings.
It's like, miscommunication galore.
Yeah. And it's a game changer when you realize that, like, love can take so many different forms.
It's mind-blowing, really. It opens up so much more compassion and understanding in our relationships.
Totally. And Tony also talked about how these different ways of expressing love often stem from our childhood experiences.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like Debbie, for example, talked about how she craved verbal affirmation from her father, but he wasn't the type to, like, express love that way.
And you can see how that's shaped her own love strategy. She's become incredibly good at expressing love through, like, actions and support, but she still longs for those words of affirmation.
Yeah. It's amazing how these early experiences can have such a lasting impact on our lives.
They really do.
Yeah.
It's like we develop these blueprints for love based on how we were loved as children.
Right, right. But the good news is we can change those blueprints.
Right.
You know, we're not stuck with them forever.
Exactly. By becoming aware of our own love strategy and understanding the love strategies of the people around us, we can start to, like, bridge those gaps and build more fulfilling relationships.
Totally. Tony talked about how, like, men and women often interact differently, even from a very young age.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
He used this great example of how, like, boys tend to engage in one-upmanship, while girls often engage in one-downmanship.
Okay.
And it's so true. Think about those classic playground dynamics.
Like what?
Like the boys are always trying to, like, outdo each other,
Right.
while the girls are more focused on, like, building each other up.
Yeah, and it's not just learned behavior,
Yeah.
It's actually rooted in our biology. Like testosterone, the male hormone, fuels competition and aggression, while estrogen, the female hormone, fosters, like, nurturing and connection.
Okay, so it's not just like a societal thing.
No, it's biological too.
So it's no wonder that, like, men and women often approach relationships differently.
Yeah, we're literally wired differently.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing, It's just something we need to be aware of so we can better understand each other.
And Tony made this really important point about how men often feel, like, most fulfilled when they're challenged,
Okay.
while women feel most fulfilled when they're appreciated.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it goes back to those core masculine and feminine energies men thrive on, like competition and achievement, while women thrive on connection and nurturing.
So if you're a woman who's constantly trying to fix your man or tell him what to do, you're actually undermining his sense of masculinity and his ability to feel fulfilled.
And if you're a man who's, like, not taking the time to appreciate and acknowledge your woman, you're neglecting her need for connection and nurturing.
It's all about understanding those, like, fundamental differences, and finding ways to, like, honor and support each other's needs.
Absolutely. And when we do that, we create relationships that are truly empowering and fulfilling for both partners.
This is where Sage Robbins, like, came in and offered some incredible insights about the importance of embracing feminine energy,
Oh, yeah.
both for women and for, like, society as a whole.
I'd love to hear more about this.
Yeah. Yeah. So she talked about how our culture often undervalues feminine qualities, like vulnerability and compassion and intuition.
And this devaluation hurts everyone, not just women.
It's so true. Like, when we suppress these qualities, we create a world that's, like, out of balance.
It's a world that's too focused on, like, logic and reason at the expense of emotion and intuition.
Exactly. And Sage emphasized that it's not about making women more masculine or men more feminine.
Right.
It's about recognizing and valuing both energies equally.
I think that's really important, because we need both energies to thrive as a society.
Right. And she made this, like, beautiful point about how the feminine is all about being rather than doing.
Oh, I like that.
Like, allowing ourselves to experience and connect with our emotions rather than trying to, like, control them.
It's about surrendering to the flow of life.
Yeah. And that's such a powerful message in a world that's constantly pushing us to do more, achieve more, be more. It's so important to remember the value of simply being present, of allowing ourselves to, like, feel and experience life fully.
To just be in the moment.
Right. And Sage's words are a reminder that we all have both masculine and feminine energy within us. It's not about choosing one over the other. It's about finding a healthy balance.
And that balance is different for everyone.
Exactly. Going back to Debbie, she had this, like, incredible realization that her father's love for her was always there, even if he didn't express it in the way she craved.
That's so sweet. It's like she finally got the validation she needed.
Yeah, and it's a powerful moment of healing and acceptance, She finally lets go of the need to prove herself and embraces the truth that she is worthy of love simply for being herself.
It's like she's finally free.
Right. And that brings us to this fascinating discussion about how men often struggle to express their feelings.
Oh, yeah, especially when it comes to vulnerability.
Exactly. And
Hey.
Tony talked about how men are often conditioned to believe that showing vulnerability is a sign of weakness.
Which is such a shame because vulnerability is actually a sign of strength. It takes courage to be open and honest about your feelings, especially in a world that tells men to man up and hide their emotions.
Totally. And this suppression of emotions can have a really negative impact on men's mental and emotional health.
Oh, absolutely. It's like they're bottling everything up inside and it's bound to explode at some point.
Right. It's no wonder that men are more likely to suffer in silence, to turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms, and to struggle to form deep, meaningful connections.
It's heartbreaking, really.
Yeah, and this is where women can play such an important role.
Like how?
By creating safe spaces for men to express their emotions without judgment.
Oh, yeah, that's so important.
We can help them break free from these harmful stereotypes and embrace their full selves.
It's about creating a culture of empathy and understanding.
Exactly. This is a really powerful reminder that we all have a role to play in creating a more compassionate and understanding world.
Absolutely. It starts with each of us embracing our own vulnerability, honoring our own needs, and creating space for others to do the same.
And Tony ended this incredible session with Debbie by highlighting the importance of intimate relationships.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. He shared this amazing statistic from a Harvard study.
What was it?
It found that the #1 predictor of happiness and well-being is having strong, intimate relationships.
That makes sense, we're social creatures wired for connection. We need to feel loved, supported, and understood.
Right. And intimate relationships provide us with that sense of belonging, that feeling of being seen and valued for who we truly are.
It's like those relationships are the oxygen that keeps us alive, both emotionally and spiritually.
I love that analogy. It's so
Yeah.
true. And it makes you realize how important it is to nurture those close relationships in our lives.
Absolutely. Those are the relationships that give us a sense of purpose and meaning.
Debbie's story is such a great example of how we can change and grow when we're open to being vulnerable and letting love in.
It really is. She started out feeling so lost and afraid. But through this process, she found a way to heal and become her true self.
It's inspiring to see how much she transformed just by being willing to look inside and face her fears.
It shows us that no matter how stuck we feel, there's always hope for change. We all have the power to create a life filled with love, joy, meaning.
But sometimes it takes courage to look at those parts of ourselves that we try to hide.
That's true. But when we share our stories and allow ourselves to be vulnerable with others, we create a space for healing and connection.
And that's what makes this whole deep dive so powerful.
Yeah.
It's not just about learning information. It's about connecting with each other on a deeper level.
Exactly. It's about realizing that we're not alone in our struggles.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to ask you, what stood out to you the most from Debbie's story? What resonated with your own experiences?
Maybe you can relate to her fear of not being enough, or maybe you struggled to embrace your own masculine or feminine energy.
Whatever it is, I encourage you to take a moment to reflect on what you've learned today and see how you can apply it to your own life.
Remember, Debbie's transformation happened because she was willing to be honest with herself and open to change. What's possible for you if you do the same?
That's something to think about as we say goodbye for now. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep exploring the power of human connection.
And remember, you are enough, just as you are.
Yeah.
It makes you realize how important it is to have those close relationships in our lives. They give us a sense of belonging and purpose,
Totally, totally. Debbie's story is such a great example of how we can change and grow when we're open to being vulnerable and letting love in.
It really is. She started out feeling so lost and afraid. But through this process, she found a way to heal and become her true self.
It's inspiring to see how much she transformed just by being willing to look inside and face her fears.
Yeah. It shows us that no matter how stuck we feel, there's always hope for change. We all have the power to create a life filled with love, joy, and meaning.
Totally. But sometimes it takes courage to look at those parts of ourselves that we try to hide.
That's true. But when we share our stories and allow ourselves to be vulnerable with others, we create a space for healing and connection.
That's what makes this whole deep dive so powerful, right? It's not just about learning information. It's about connecting with each other on a deeper level.
Exactly. It's about realizing that we're not alone in our struggles.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to ask you, what stood out to you the most from Debbie's story? What resonated with your own experiences?
Maybe you can relate to her fear of not being enough. Or maybe you've struggled to embrace your own masculine or feminine energy.
Whatever it is, I encourage you to take a moment to reflect on what you've learned today and see how you can apply it to your own life.
Remember, Debbie's transformation happened because she was willing to be honest with herself and open to change. What's possible for you if you do the same?
That's a great point, yeah. That's something to think about as we say goodbye for now. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep exploring the power of human connection.
And remember, you are enough, just as you are.